Since the Sandbox fans, I'm sure you're seeing the different background. We're here in Quincy checking out Workbar. They asked us to debut their beautiful new podcast studio. We got some people working, doing some meetings and phone calls right outside here, but this is a sick space.
It's a good spot, big spot.
But we love it here. We got a nice tour from Melinda, and shout out to Rosie, who actually reached out to us on TikTok to come here. And we've been working on this since April. So this is a really good location. You know, if you're a professional working from home and you're looking to, you know, be a little bit more productive and get that office type of scenery, you can come and get memberships here at the Workbar. You can come and test out the podcast studio. Got all the equipment for you. Just come with a smile and a camera and, you know, maybe some notes, because that's obviously beneficial to doing a successful podcast episode. But it's Tuesday. We're on vacation. We got Aruba coming up next week. You're going to Nantucket this weekend.
I'm on a lifelong vacation.
Yeah. Twan's on a bender, for real. He's been on a 3-month bender since.
It's called retirement.
Yeah, right. Retiring early. Let me know whatever you do in Vegas so I can do the same thing. But no, we're excited to debut this podcast studio and continue our schedule predictions. So at this point, you guys heard the AFC North and the NFC North. We're here to give you the AFC South, and I'm so excited for this one because I know you're big on the Texans. I think that there's some talent inside that division. I'm going to get things started with the Titans, and this is obviously going to be a different year for Tennessee. No Vrabel, no Derrick Henry. And, you know, the quarterback position is going to be a little bit different. They invested in some fancy pieces on the offense and defensive side of the ball. So, you know, I feel like the thoughts for Tennessee are really kind of all over the place because a lot of people think, well, you know, they're going to be like a bottom of the barrel team. But, you know, I always view Tennessee as like a team on any given day that can beat somebody. But that was also with Vrabel. You know what I mean?
Like a huge piece
part of that. Absolutely. But with the Titans, you know, they're starting off week 1 versus the Bears, and everybody's giving this win to the Bears. Like, everybody is like, oh, they're giving Caleb Williams a layup week 1. And I do have that here. I do have the Titans losing, but it would not surprise me by any means. Might put a couple hundred units on the Tennessee Titans week 1 just to start off the season right.
Couple hundred units.
Couple hundred units, right?
We got to talk about Vegas.
We want to start off the season right, and we want to be playing with DraftKings money, right? We don't want to be playing with our own money. So, yeah, maybe not a couple hundred units, but maybe a unit. But a loss week 1 versus the Bears, a loss week 2 versus the Jets, and a loss week 3 versus the Packers. That's a tough stretch the first 3 weeks. Even if you were to win the Bears game, you got no chance versus the Jets and the Packers.
100%.
So 0-3 to start, but getting a win versus the Dolphins week 4, Monday Night Football. Feel like this is a big game, and they upset the Dolphins, what was it, last year or a couple years ago in the big game. So 1-3 going into the bye week. It's a real early bye week for Tennessee, and you know, I feel like in previous seasons this would be the time, oh, like, are we going to start going to Levis, or, you know, they obviously drafted, you know, an abundance of quarterbacks over the past couple of years, but after the bye week, when those questions are all kind of going on, I actually have them dropping every single game up until week 11. So a loss versus the Colts, versus Buffalo, versus the Lions, giving the Patriots a win, so lost to the Patriots at the Chargers and versus the Vikings. So they only have one win up until, 1-9 through 11 weeks. Really, really tough start for the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah, so Steve, we're very, very similar through the first 4 weeks. We're the exact same. Then they come in the bye week.
So you have them getting the win versus the Dolphins?
I do have them getting the win versus the Dolphins.
Okay.
I don't like the Dolphins, man. I don't think they're that good this year. But I do have them sneaking a win over Buffalo, losing to Detroit and New England, of course. And then I do have them sneaking a win against LA as well. I know you're high on LA this year, but I do think there are going to be these games that they drop where they could play down to their competition.
Talk about the game to Buffalo a little bit, though. Like, how do you think that game flow is going to go with Tennessee gets away with the win?
It just feels like one of these games where Buffalo's still trying to figure out who they are. Maybe it's one of these games they decide they want to sling on Tennessee and they get rid of the run game. It just feels like one of these games where there's a
interception game for Josh Allen.
It just feels kind of ugly to me. This looks like one of those games where it's going to be Buffalo's going to be 15.5, 16-point favorites, and Tennessee's going to come out and get a crazy dumb upset that everyone's going to go, what? This is the NFL again.
Yeah.
So, in looking at these tough stretch of games, I do think they're going to get a win in the middle of it, and I just think that it's going to be against a little bit of a higher echelon team, it's not going to be against the Lions. Let's be real. It's not going to be against the Lions. But I can see Buffalo dropping a couple of these games to some of these lower level teams this year, and I think that this is going to be one that Tennessee sneaks. Other than that, the only other win I have that's different than yours is the Chargers.
Okay. So we'll pick it up at week 12, and I do have them getting a division win versus the Texans. Not an easy game, but look, division opponents, as a Patriot fan, you know this more than anybody. Like, anyone can win those games. It's just the way it goes, especially when you have a heavy favorite in the Texans versus a team like this. The spread's probably going to be like 8.5. The money line's probably going to be around like 350 or something like that, depending on how these two teams play to that point in the season. But I have the Titans getting that win and then going on a streak. So after that, getting a win versus Washington, a win versus the Jaguars, and a win versus the Bengals, which we talked about in the AFC North positional rankings. Really interesting to see what the Bengals will be like at that point in time. But I also know as well as they can play with some of the top teams, they can also drop some of those games. And I do think Tennessee is going to play people really well. I think from week 12 to week 15, when they go on this 4-game win streak, people are going to be like, oh, like, the Titans are like coming together like next year, like they could potentially be a threat. Like maybe we're talking about D-Hop being aged just a tad, but you got Calvin Ridley, you got Boyd coming in. Obviously they have a new look running back room, and the defense they invested in. So maybe this is just like at the end of this year, they're looking at it like, hey, like going into the 25 season, like we're going to be okay. Maybe we might still have quarterback questions. There could still potentially be head coach questions. But things are starting to get a little bit more sound towards the end of the season. But after that, losing 3 straight, loss versus the Colts, Jaguars, Texans. So losing 3 straight in the division, that's really tough at the end of the season. And, you know, obviously this ship can get written really differently. I have them finishing with 5-12 record, 2-4 in the division. They win those 3 division games at the end of the season. You're talking about an 8-9 football team, and you going 5-1 in the division. Things can really change here depending on the win totals on the Colts or the Texans. But I think that, you know, it's tough to say that Tennessee isn't going to struggle this season with so much unfamiliarity and newness to that organization everywhere. So 5-12 for the Titans.
Steve, I'm very, very similar with you here. I do have them dropping the game to the Texans, but I actually have them going on a 4-win streak after that. So it's Washington, Jacksonville, Cincy, Indy, losing to Jacksonville and losing to Houston to end the season. So I do have them going 7-10 to finish.
And Houston sweeping Tennessee in this.
Houston is sweeping Tennessee in this.
Any other sweeps?
No, not against the Titans.
Okay.
not against the Titans. But again, 7-10 with a late game stretch. I can just see them as being one of the teams that start to come on later.
Is that the record of game, 7-10?
7-10, yeah.
See, that's where I had them, but I just think the Colts are going to win a little bit more games. I know, like, I'm sure you're going to have the Texans at a pretty lofty win total. I don't think it's going to be that extravagant. Wouldn't surprise me at all, and I actually think it might be a little bit more realistic to sit around that 7-10, 6-11 mark than the 5-12, but... You know, I think that's just part of the season playing out. And you know, maybe Jacksonville's not as good as we're kind of expecting them to be. So why don't you take us to Jacksonville?
We'll go to Jacksonville. I'm going to start with Duval County, a team that I was so high on last year, and they have just got me memed. But I have them losing week 1 right off the bat in Miami. I think Miami's good in the first half of the season, especially when they're at home. It's warm over there, and they can only play in the warmth. So I do think they're going to get the win over Jacksonville. So Jacksonville is taking an L to start, but then they're going to sneak a bullshit win over Cleveland at home.
Okay.
I just think they're going to catch Cleveland off guard, win that game, and people are going to think that the Jags are all that. But then I have them losing the next 2 straight, 1 to Buffalo and then 1 to Houston. And I'm going to finish with 1 more game. They're going to sneak a game against Indy at home this year.
Wow, you really have it out for Indy, Lou. I don't know what's going on here, Lou. No, I mean, I don't have too different of a start. I have them start in 2 and 3. Have them drop in the first 3. I honestly just think, like, they're not a beginning of the season team, and neither are the Colts. Like, the Colts are going to drop a couple in my schedule predictions. The Jaguars, I have them dropping 3 straight, but getting a big win versus the Texans and then a win versus the Colts. So getting 2 division wins after dropping 3 out of the divisions. I feel like that'll be a really good kind of like turnaround for them. Maybe that's when ETN starts to pick it up. Hopefully, they're all healthy, but you still have a rookie wide receiver getting acclimated. You want the defense to be a little bit more present for the Jacksonville Jaguars, but I think the loss versus the Dolphins is going to be like a really close, sloppy game. Maybe the difference in that game is Mostert potentially breaking one out if he picks up where he left off last season. Maybe it's OBJ as the third wide receiver and teams just not having enough corners to cover all three of those guys. The Browns game I think is going to be really messy, really sloppy. Don't think either of those teams are going to score 20 points. I think Buffalo is going to blow them out though. Monday Night Football, I actually don't think it's going to be close. But then
Buffalo too. That's what I'm saying.
After that, though, they start their London stretch, and I have them winning both of those games. So that's versus the Bears and versus the Patriots. So after starting 0-3, 4-3 through 7 weeks, pretty decent start for Jags.
I got them dropping both London games.
Do you?
I do, and I know
that's their home field.
I know that's their home field, but dude, I can see them losing a bad one to Jacksonville, and a bad one to New England. I can see them losing to Chicago too. I just think Chicago's going to sneak one of those games. And again, I think it's more likely that they beat Chicago than New England, not because Chicago's not as good of a team as New England. I don't believe that's the case. I just feel like the way that things went when they went to, I think it was Munich last year, when we played the Colts, dude, we had the win, and we just fucking blew it. Yeah. I don't know that that's going to happen against a less quality team than Indy was in Jacksonville this year.
Do you have better expectations for the Patriots this year than last? Because I feel like going into the year, everybody still kind of felt like they were like
10-7 last year. Yeah, I do not have them 10-7 this year.
But I mean, like beating a team like the Jags, like I feel like that would be like a big win for the Patriots.
I don't think the Jags are going to be that good, and that's why I'm going to keep it rolling down the list. So I have them dropping 2, and they're 2-5 to start, Steve.
So big difference.
Then they get 2 crazy wins that they have no business winning against Green Bay and in Philly.
Wow,
dropping 3 in a row after that.
Losing to the Pats and then beating the Philly Eagles.
That's how the NFL goes, man. It's crazy. Losing to Minnesota, losing to Detroit, losing to Houston, and losing to Tennessee. So they have a 4-game loss stretch after that. That brings them to what am I going to count this up? 4 and 10 pretty much. Tough stretch. Or 4 and 8. Sorry.
That is tough. After 4-3 through those first 7 weeks, I have them dropping the games that you had them winning, the Packers and the Eagles, getting a win versus the Vikings and a loss to the Lions before the bye week. And then after that, to the end of the season, they get four losses in the end of the season. Loss versus the Texans and the Titans, versus the Jets, and then the Colts the last week of the season, which could realistically have, implications for the playoffs. With the record I give Jacksonville, maybe not for them so much, but more specifically for Indy and their division race with the Houston Texans. I do have the Jaguars beating the Raiders and the Titans in that stretch towards the back end. I think those are real close, gritty games, and I think all of those teams, the Titans, the Raiders, the Jaguars, are all in the same conversation. The Chargers for maybe that middle of the pack, but closing out a strong fourth quarter could realistically put them in the win column more often than not. This has the Jaguars finishing with a 7-10 record, so a couple wins above the Titans, couple wins under the Colts and the Texans, which we're going to talk about next. But a 3-3 division record, I feel like, is pretty decent for them.
Steve, I got them going 2-2 to finish those last 4 games, and the game that I have them winning is against the Jets. I just think they're going to pull out games and catch teams off guard when they think they have it lost. I think Jacksonville's going to look really bad this year. I got them finishing 6-11.
6-11. So that's worse than the Titans.
Worse than the Titans. I think Jacksonville's in for a tough year. I think they paid Trevor, and it's going to be one of those years where they go, did we make the mistake of just paying a dude that just we looked at and didn't play for it yet?
Is that the conversation in the offseason? Yeah.
100%.
It's interesting because you obviously compare the money in the quarterback conversation. I sent it in the chat we have, the betting chat that we have a couple weeks ago, and you compared the first 48 games of Trevor Lawrence and the first 48 games of Daniel Jones, and those statistics were identical.
Yep.
And where people thought the Giants were getting kind of screwed out of their money and everything like that, you look at the Trevor Lawrence contract and it's well, if we franchise tagged him, now that contract would have been $55 million a year rather than $40. So
yep.
I'm kind of happy with the way it worked out. Obviously hoping Daniel Jones stays healthy and plays, but if not, we already know that we're in the quarterback conversation for the following year, and that's
not hung up on a dude for $55 million.
Absolutely, and Trevor Lawrence is not a dude I'd want to be paying $55 million by any means. But we're gonna take this over to Indy now, Lou. I got you. Don't listen to this much over here. All right?
You don't even know what the numbers are coming out, all right?
I don't. But it don't matter. It don't matter. The Colts are going to start off with a loss. They usually do. That's not, it's not going to be a blowout win versus the Texans. I think that they'll keep it close, especially with it being a home game. I just think the Texans had a lot of talk throughout the offseason. I feel like if you don't come in and beat the division opponent week one, like, that's going to look real shitty right off the rip. So, loss versus the Texans, a loss versus the Packers, which are a tough two first games, by the way, even like with the Texans being a division opponent. But a win week 3 versus the Bears, and then dropping 2 straight, dropping versus the Steelers and the Jaguars. Not the start the Colts want, but they could still get to where they need to go. So 1-5 through the first 5 has them getting a win week 6 versus the Titans, and 2-4 is a little bit better. But after the 6 weeks, hoping that there's no injuries to Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, obviously bringing in new pieces of the wide receiver room. Hoping that continues to flourish and they can establish that defensive side of the ball a little bit. I think that the Colts are going to have a better second half of the season, and you'll find out real soon.
Bro, I'm smiling because you go, Lou, I'm going to take care of the Colts. And you go,
don't worry. It's all good.
Don't worry, Lou. I'm going to take care of the Colts.
Yeah, through the first 5 weeks, kid.
Don't worry. I do have them beating Houston in the first week.
Okay.
I think that this is just written in the stars where Houston has been yapping. CJ Stroud's been yapping. I like it. I like the confidence. I like that he showed it last year that he's one of the top guys. And I do think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But I do think they're going to drop this first game and everyone's going to be yipping about the Texans. Now we'll get to what happens after that. I do have Indy losing to Green Bay in the second week, but rattling 2 wins in a row off against Chicago and winning a tough game against Pittsburgh at home. I have them dropping to Jacksonville, but I have them winning in Tennessee. And I think that's where you stopped right there.
Yes.
So for the first couple weeks, I got it flipped. I got 4-2.
Wow, I love that. I mean, that's a good start for somebody that doesn't have them on top, but I'm sure you're going to destroy Lou with the second half of the season.
Dude, I'm fair.
After the 2-4 start, though, with the Dolphins, I do have that being a loss. I think that's a tough game. I just think the Dolphins will score a little bit more points than them, honestly. But getting right the next week versus the Texans in a division game, really important. Every single time they play the Texans, it's crucial. And where they drop the first game of the season versus them, this is practically a Super Bowl for the Colts if they want to be a successful team this year. Lost week 9 to the Vikings. I just think that's going to be a really close game. Maybe you see an Aaron Jones take over. Maybe it's a 218 Justin Jefferson for 11 catches. Maybe it's a big hockey game like that can go in any single direction. But, by this point in time in the season for the Colts, Adonai Mitchell should be very acclimated. Pittman should continue, his presence, and we should be able to see, a healthy Anthony Richardson really develop and play, through 9 weeks at this point. But after that devastating loss week 9 to the Vikings, 2 big wins over AFC East opponents versus the Bills, versus the Jets on Sunday Night Football, and the winning continues through the bye, beating the Lions, beating the Patriots, and that takes us to the bye week. Those 4 wins through that middle of the season changed the season for the Indianapolis Colts. And look, you heard me start them off real unfortunate, but being a good team in the NFL, you have to overcome adversity, and I think they do that through the middle of the season. The bye week 14, I feel like if this is going to be a playoff team, that's a perfect time for them to get the bye. Continuing through the rest of the season, I had them finishing 3-1. Win versus the Broncos, win versus the Titans week 16. Do have them losing to the Giants. I actually think that game can go either way, honestly. I don't think the Giants are going to finish with a better record than the Colts by any means, but I think that the way the NFC East is going to work out, and you guys will hear that real soon, it's going to be a competitive division for all 4 teams. And then a win week 18 versus the Jaguars, and I talked about during the Jaguars schedule predictions how crucial that game can really be. But I originally had the Colts starting with 7-10, but had to switch that around a little bit because I think that they're going to be a better team than the Jaguars, who I have finishing at 7-10. And I think that they're going to be in playoff contention. So this gives the Colts a 10-7 record, but more importantly, being 4-2 in the division with a couple of sweeps, feel like that's really important. And that's the difference of division games, is being able to not only give a loss to somebody in your division, but also getting that leg up to make sure if you do have the same record with the Texans, every single one of those games count. 10-7 for the Colts, that is a playoff spot.
Yeah, Steve, the last couple of weeks, I have them 6-5 to finish out from there, so I also have them finishing 10-7.
Okay, that's better than I thought you were going to give them.
No, that's what I said. I was like, hear it out. But I have them beating Miami, losing to Houston, beating Minnesota. I do have them dropping 2 in a row to Buffalo and New York, but that's where they say, dude, we want to make the playoffs. What are we doing here? They go on a stretch and beating Detroit. They beat New England, they beat Denver, they lose to Tennessee, lose to the Giants in a tough game, but they finish strong with a win against Jacksonville, getting them into the wild card spot in the playoffs.
Love that. All right, we got one more team left in the division, but at this point in time, before we get to the Texans, how are you feeling about like my schedule predictions? Did you think that they were pretty accurate to what your thoughts on mine were? Were you like
They're pretty on par with what I thought we were talking about. They're pretty similar to as to mine were. I know you talked about a 5-12 Titans record, but I know on the way here we talked about 5-12 is just kind of how it shook out. You really think they're going to be more around a 7-win spot?
Yes.
So I think they're really similar. Are you shocked with how low I have the Jags?
It's only a win less than me. I think I'm more surprised by the Titans positioning rather than the lack of the Jags positioning. Sure. But I honestly just feel like that's the type of team that we've known the Titans to be. So it's like, are you going to still keep playing like your brand of football, or is that identity completely going to change with like a new coach, a new personnel? But let's see what the Titans do inside this Texans schedule prediction.
Well, so as I mentioned earlier, they're going to start with an L against Indy, and everyone's going to go, oh, they yap so much. The Texans aren't them, because everyone overreacts after 1 week. But they go on a big 5-game win stretch down the road here. Against Chicago, Minnesota, Jacksonville. I think they're going to slaughter Buffalo too. I think Buffalo's going to be. I think
talk about that game a little bit.
I think this is going to be one of those games where everyone's going to go, dude, I don't know. Like, Texans have won a lot in a row. Buffalo may be coming off a loss at this point, or Buffalo may need to show things. They're going down to Houston for it. They're playing in a dome. And I think C.J. Stroud is going to say, I'm a better quarterback. And he's going to go out. Now, do I think he's a better quarterback? I think he has more potential. We'll see how Josh Allen plays, though, because I think Josh Allen has all the potential in the world, but he does those things that kind of hurt his team, where C.J. Stroud doesn't do that.
Yeah, I actually think that...
And it's a Diggs revenge game.
Okay, so you...
I think
give me a stat line for Diggs. I know we're in June, but...
I think they're going to force feed him the ball. I think he's going to go 10 for 123 and a touchdown.
Okay.
So, really, really good game there. I don't think it's going to be anything crazy, because I think they know they're going to go, let's cover Diggs. And then Nico's going to break them open. They go, shit, we can't just cover Diggs. We got to cover Nico. Oh, Schultz is getting the ball now, too. Then you're going to be forced. When you play the Texans, you're kind of forced to play one-on-one or a zone.
Yeah.
And that's a
those
nightmare
guys can
matchup.
tear it apart, of course.
Because then when Tank Dell comes back, when John Mechie is fully back, like, dude, their team is loaded
Schultz,
this year.
Nico
they
Collins.
didn't need Diggs for me to put them where I think they're going to be.
No, for sure. They didn't. It's just like a little icing on the cake that can probably sneak away, an extra win or two. Mm-hmm. I actually think that... I know we're talking about the Texans here, but since we wanted to go in depth about the Bills specifically, I actually think this can be an MVP season for Josh Allen. I feel like it has to be for the Bills to stay relevant.
Right.
You take away his pieces, they're left with their back against the wall. What are you going to do? You had the season last year where you had, your mistakes, and you have to overcome like that adversity and everything like that. We know your top potential, what you can do with your feet, with your big arm ability and everything like that, but it's like, put up a shut up. Like the Jets are going to be here to win. The Dolphins didn't lose like too many pieces besides the devastating loss of Christian Wilkins, who I feel like is going to have a crazy season with the Raiders.
Yep.
But let's jump back in with the Texans, who I have winning the first 3 games. Colts division game, Bears and the Vikings beating up on the NFC North, losing versus the Jags, and also losing versus Buffalo. So have that same game. A win versus the Patriots, a win versus the Packers, which I feel like is going to be a really close, tough game, because you have these two quarterbacks getting to their stardom at the very similar time in AFC and NFC. Both won a playoff game last year. Both are viewed as, the model or the mold for a future quarterback. So, those are a lot of the things that are going to be talked about, throughout that matchup. I'm sure those guys, when we're doing fantasy football rankings that week, will crack the top 5 for sure going against each other.
In Lambeau in November, I have them dropping that one, though.
Do you?
I think it's going to be
November,
hard.
week 7?
Is it week 7? It's week 7, so maybe it's the end of October, but it's going to be cold by then up there. Lambeau's a tough place to play. And they just, the way I had it working out is they rattled 5 off in a row. They're going to go into Green Bay, and it's going to be a tough, hard-fought game.
Yeah.
Circle this one. This could be game of the year.
Yeah, no, it really could be. And I'm happy that we're getting, some games that are sneaking up that we can circle in the middle of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Like I talked about in the North predictions, like I didn't love that the Chiefs and the Ravens were the first week of the season.
Yeah,
but,
I know.
Maybe a big player on one of those two teams gets injured, and it's like, all right, well, we're happy we got to see them at that point in time. But after the Packers, I had them losing to the Colts, getting a win Thursday Night Football versus the Jets, and then 3 losses in a row. Loss versus the Lions, Cowboys, and Titans, with 1 win versus the Jags before the bye week.
So I got it a little bit different here. I have them, again, losing to the Packers, but winning against Indy, losing to the Jets. So now to this point, they're 6-3. Steve, I got them winning against Detroit at home. I have them going
that's a
into
big
Dallas
run.
and
Look
winning.
at that run
I
right
have
there.
them. I have them going into Dallas and taking a W. I have them beating Tennessee. So to this point, I have them winning all 3 of those games, and I actually have them winning out. Now I have an L right here next to Tennessee, but when I did Tennessee, I had an L next to Houston.
Oh,
I think one of these games they can drop.
Yeah.
14-3 is what this ends up shaking out to be if I made that consistent. I think 13-4 is the number, though. I think 14 games in the NFL is a little bit too tricky to win, but I do think they go on a stretch. They rip off those games, and those are tough games.
This got to
They're
be.
going to be the team to beat KC.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, they're the team. They are tailor-made to do it. It's hard to cover that team. And I get it. KC can put up points. They have Pat Mahomes. They can beat anyone on any given day. It's just who they are. I get that. But the way these two teams match up, it is harder to cover the Texans than it is to cover the Chiefs. And I honestly think that with the loss of L'Jarius Sneed, the Texans might have the edge in the corner room.
Okay.
Or in the secondary, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, obviously being able to get, a guy like Stingley, who I feel like hasn't gotten the recognition that, he's really deserved for quite some time. Like, this is his opportunity to, kind of show that. Usually, 2 years ago when we saw the Jets have, a really good season, you saw Sauce. And, last year, obviously top corners, all throughout. But some of, those top teams, they really have elite cornerback play. And I feel like that really comes down to it. And the Texans have a bunch of pieces on the defensive side of the ball. So it is their time to hold their own so their offense can, continue to put up. But 13 wins, that has to be good enough for what, a 1 seed in the AFC?
That's the 1 seed in the AFC.
So what do you think is a worst case scenario for the Texans? You have them going 13-4, and obviously you'd think that's realistic, that's attainable, but what could steer the ship away from getting to that?
Injuries only.
Yeah?
Injuries are the only thing I can see, because I honestly think that as much shit as you want to talk about CJ Stroud if he's yapping, I think he's so clean between the ears. I think he's I don't care about what you have to say. I'm going to go out and win games. Glory to be to God. That's who he is, dude. He puts his best foot forward every single time, and he plays unbelievable football. We thought that he was that good, and then they came out with a test score, and we go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
He might be a dumbass.
Yeah.
It turns out
I know.
he lit up the field in his rookie season. The Jags were supposed to be good.
Yeah.
The Colts are getting there. And I think the Colts are the second best team in that division. But I just think, and the Colts are going to be the best team in a lot of different divisions, I think, this year. But not in this one. I think the Texans are just better because their offense is great. They have a good O-line. They have a great O-lineman. They have a good O-line. I think they're well coached. I think they're very disciplined. And I think that defense is very good. You get Will Anderson in year 2. You have Blake Cashman came into his own.
Do you have that being the top defense in this division?
Yeah. And he's close, but I think they might end up with DeForest Buckner is just DeForest Buckner. I think he's the best player in the division, period.
Wow.
But I think
That's a big statement.
the best defensive player in the position. Period. I do think so. Josh Allen's not too far behind.
Yeah.
But I think Stingley's one of the best secondary players. He might be the best in the secondary in the division if I'm maybe Sneed.
Yeah.
So I would say Sneed for Tennessee, but we'll see how he is with a new team. But Stingley's up there. Best safety's Jalen Petrie.
Yeah, no doubt.
No doubt it's Jalen Petrie. The best young pass rusher is Will Anderson.
Okay.
I think Will Anderson's an absolute stud, and we saw him coming on last year. And think about what another year with D'Amico Ryans, a defensive-minded coach, does for an outside linebacker like that, a pass rusher.
All right, so before we break it down, we obviously have to talk about some fantasy football when we're talking about these schedule predictions. So we have the Tennessee Titans acquiring Calvin Ridley. It was a very different type of move, and then obviously bringing in Tony Pollard, not drafting a running back, but giving, a young running back a bigger opportunity here. And you have high expectations for, that running back. So with Joe Mixon being a new running back for the Houston Texans and, you got the backfield in Tennessee, I just kind of want you to compare and contrast what those positions are really going to look like and, maybe a tier between those 3 guys as far as a fantasy football perspective.
I think Mixon's the guy you got to go with if you want one consistent guy and you need a running back at that point. I think he's just going to be the bell cow in that offense. They might mix in Dameon Pierce at little points in the season, but again, we can't rely on his health.
Opportunity.
He lost his aura. He lost everything he had, pretty much. again, you can sprinkle him in, but when you have a guy like Mixon who has proven his health last year specifically, I think he's going to be a really nice fit with that team, especially when you have that wide receiver room that's going to take a lot of attention. You're going to be able to hand the ball off to Mixon. He's going to be successful.
Okay.
He's going to have goal line touchdowns. I think Pollard's going to be terrible.
Yeah.
Not terrible, but I think he's going to lose his starting job.
Okay.
I think Tajay Spears is going to end up taking over that backfield, and I think he's going to be the running back that you want. It's not going to start that way. By week 4, though, you'll know. He's going to be the guy in that backfield. They're going to incorporate him more and more and more. If you're playing PPR, he's going to be the pass catcher. And I get it, Tony can kind of catch passes, but Tajay Spears can actually run out of the backfield and make a catch, whereas Tony Pollard's more of like a swing pass catch guy. You know what I mean?
Make somebody miss. Yeah, I feel that.
So I think Tajay Spears is the guy you're going to want to have. I am very weary on Tony Pollard. Especially with his injury history, I'm very, very weary with Tony Pollard.
All right, so with having Calvin Ridley come into the division, and we have a guy like Travis Etienne who's been acclimated for the Jaguars for a little bit. If we're talking at least in like a flex scenario, what's the guy that you'd prefer to have over those two?
It's Etienne.
Yeah, no,
It's Etienne.
it's no conversation.
Yeah, it's no conversation. I just
But
don't.
would you view Ridley as the one there, or do you still think it's D-Hop?
I think it's Hop, dude. I think being there for a year with Will Levis and being able to work out with Will Levis matters.
Yeah.
And I think just sheer talent, he is the most talented receiver on that team.
Okay.
And I think with the way he plays, like his routes are crispy and Calvin Ridley's routes are crispy. But a jump ball, I'm going to take D-Hop over Ridley.
Okay.
Until he shows me he can't come down with it.
Yeah.
He's come down with it with 4 people on him.
For sure.
We've seen it. Like,
All right.
I'm going to go with D-Hop as the one. Wouldn't be surprised if they're neck and neck with points, though.
Last fantasy question before we wrap up the episode. Colts drafted Donnie Mitchell, who's going to have big expectations to be, a wide receiver 2 next to Michael Pittman in that offense. Obviously, AR is going to be running the ball as long as he's, healthy and on the fields, along with Jonathan Taylor. But with adding a Stephon Diggs to the Houston Texans, I feel like somebody's going to lose a little bit of what they had last year. You got Nico Collins, you got Tank Dell, you got Stephon Diggs. Do you think Adonai Mitchell can have a better fantasy football season than any of those 3 players? And if so, who is the guy?
I think it's Tank that's going to lose it.
Do you?
I think he's going to play well, but I just don't think he's going to get
The volume.
the volume right. He's not going to be the 2 on the team.
Yeah.
And if he is, then someone's going to be, some Diggs is going to fucking cry. But
So you think
I
it's
think-
still Nico Collins as the one for the Texans with Diggs and Tank Dell just kind of switching off games, or do you think
I think
Adonai
Diggs
Mitchell can
and-
still have a better season than both Dell and Diggs?
I think Adonai Mitchell will have a better one than Dell. I think he'll have a much better season than people are going to give him credit for. I don't think he's going to pass Diggs, though. I do think by the end of the season, Nico will still be the one. But I think they're going to have their games where they completely switch on and off. But I think, call me crazy, man, I think that CJ Stroud is going to say, you know what? Nico and I have been doing this for a bit now, and he has not failed me yet.
I
And
think
he's
Nico
gonna-
Collins is the wide
I think
receiver
he's
to have.
going to be the one.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. And I think it might not look that way in the first couple weeks. I think they're going to have teams that they're going to try and get Diggs acclimated.
Yeah.
But I think as the season goes on, I think the consistency is going to come from Nico Collins.
Love that. And obviously, the Jaguars have a different wide receiver room. I think that, Christian Kirk has definitely shown us that he's capable of being, a low-end wide receiver 1, honestly, like as far as the fantasy perspective goes. And, adding in a rookie wide receiver there is only going to help. And Evan Ingram had a huge season last year. So we'll see what happens. But this was the AFC South schedule predictions from the Work Bar in Quincy. So thank you to Work Bar for letting us come in and, break down the AFC South. And, we're excited to get over to the NFC, give you guys that schedule prediction and, hang out a little bit more here. We want to make sure that you guys are coming to hang out with us August 17th at our 5-year event, the Orient Heights Yacht Club, to celebrate 5 years of podcasting. We're going to have a live show going on. We have Young Sinatra and Uncle Tony on the music. We got DJ Potential coming in. A couple photographers going to have brand new merch line coming for you guys. Really excited putting all that together. So if you guys have any questions with the event, we're just under 2 months and we're hoping to see you there. You guys know the deal. Peace, love, 5 stars, nothing less.